Hello and welcome to 5 Minutes with Gavin Scott. The poet John Masefield was born in 1878 in Ledborough, Hertfordshire, England. His mother died in childbirth when he was 6, and his father had a mental breakdown and died shortly after. He was then sent to live with an aunt who disapproved of his constant habit of reading and sent him to a boarding school to break him of the habit. When that didn't work, she had him drafted at the age of 13 into the Navy. Here, I'm pleased to say, he not only continued to read, especially books like Treasure Island, but inspired by his travels and the stories heard from fellow sailors, he began writing himself. His final voyage in 1895, when he was 17, was to New York, and here he jumped ship and became successively a vagrant, an assistant barkeeper, and a worker in a carpet factory, which paid well enough for him to buy 20 books a week, with which I entirely sympathise. Eventually, at 23, he returned to England, took a poorly paid job in a bank, and met a math teacher, Constance, who was 12 years older than him, but adored him, understood his literary ambitions, and supported him from family money. They were happily married for the rest of their lives and had 2 children. From 1911, Masefield began to write the poems that made his name, and was generally acknowledged as a genius. During World War I, he went to France and Gallipoli to help look after wounded soldiers, wrote best-selling books supporting the war effort, and returned to America as a lecturer on English literature for the American soldiers waiting to be sent to the battlefront. After the war, he settled in the British countryside, took up beekeeping and goat herding, and produced a succession of best-selling books of poetry and a dozen novels, including one of my favourite children's books, The Box of Delights, of which more later. In 1930, he was made Britain's Poet Laureate and kept the job until his death in 1967. And I think the 2 poems I'm about to read make it clear why.
The first poem, Cargoes, is one I always think of when I hear the BBC shipping forecast with its dire warnings of furious gales in the North Atlantic, and I like to imagine the coastal steamers plying unstoppably through the dirty weather of sea areas Dogger Bank or German Bight. The poem starts off, though, in sunnier climes, imagining the great ships of the ancient Mediterranean, including a 3-decked Babylonian galley called a quinquereme, coming out of the port of Ophir, from which, according to the Bible, King Solomon received cargoes of gold, sandalwood and pearls. The isthmus he mentions is Panama, on the fabled Spanish Main, where the real pirates of the Caribbean congregated, waiting to pounce on the treasure ships headed for Europe, packed with the metal needed to make the much-desired coins known as moidores. Here we go. Cargoes. Quinquereme of Nineveh, from distant Ophir, rowing home to haven in sunny Palestine, with a cargo of ivory and apes and peacocks, sandalwood, cedarwood, and sweet white wine. Stately Spanish galleon, coming from the isthmus, dipping through the tropics by the palm-green shores, with a cargo of diamonds, emeralds, amethysts, topaz, and gold moidores. Dirty British coaster, with a salt-caked smokestack butting through the channel in the mad March days, with a cargo of tine coal, road rails, pig lead, firewood, ironware, and cheap tin trays. And here's the second Masefield from my chest of favourites, Sea Fever. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by, and the wheels kick, and the wind's song, and the white sails shaking, and a grey mist on the sea's face, and a grey dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call, and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day, with the white clouds flying, and the flung spray, and the blown spume, and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife, and all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over.